Hi, I'm Bruce Horak. I played Lieutenant Hemmer on Strange New Worlds, and you are listening to Trek Untold.
Welcome back to Trek Untold, the Star Trek podcast that goes beyond the stars. I am your host, Matthew Kaplowitz. The wave of modern Star Trek shows have caused friction among fans for many reasons, but there's one new iteration of Star Trek that everyone agrees, or nearly everyone agrees, is practically perfect. And that would be Strange New Worlds. Set 10 years prior to Star Trek Discovery, this show is the original voyage of the Enterprise with Captain Pike at the helm instead of Captain Kirk. And simply put, there were no bad episodes of Strange New Worlds Season 1, and I'm confident the trend will continue for many seasons to come. Part of what made it so great was the cast of characters aboard that ship, and that leads us to who today's guest is. Bruce Horak played Hemmer on the first season of Strange New Worlds, and Aenar, which is a subspecies of the Andorians who have telepathic powers. Most importantly, Horak is the first legally blind actor to be cast as part of the main crew in a Star Trek show, and this chief engineer quickly became a fan favorite, including mine. Beyond Trek, Bruce is an artist extraordinaire. He's a painter, he's a stage performer, and an overall truly fascinating guy with a pretty inspiring life story. This is without a doubt one of my favorite interviews of the year, and I think you're going to love every second of it too. So let's snap to it and get this conversation running at full warp power and learn all about Bruce Horak. But before we begin this week's episode, I want to remind you to follow Trek Untold on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Trek Untold, all one word. You can get show updates, check out some fun memes, and let me know what you think about what's going on with the current events in the Star Trek universe. You can also support this show directly on Patreon at patreon.com/Trek Untold, where you can support this show for as little as $2 a month. At higher tiers, you can listen to the shows before they come out, know about my guests well in advance, and even have a chance to ask them questions, get transcripts of these episodes to make sure you get all the info, and more benefits coming soon, including watch parties and live streams. But that's all dependent on more fans like you coming over and letting me know you want to be a part of events like that. If you want some Trek Untold merchandise, check out our store for gear and apparel, including shirts, hats, stickers, water bottles, notebooks, and a whole lot more. New designs will be added throughout the year, so it's always worth taking a peek. Trek Untold also has an Amazon shop where you can peruse everything Star Trek, sci-fi, and geeky on Amazon in one convenient location. If you're looking for a gift for the Trekkie in your life, or maybe want to see some of my favorite non-Star Trek things that you can get for yourself, check out the link for my Amazon shop in the show notes on the audio version and in the description below this video on YouTube. If you're listening to us on iTunes or any other audio platforms that allow for ratings and reviews, please leave us a 5-star rating and a positive review to help out this show. If you're watching it on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to us at youtube.com/Trek Untold and give the video a thumbs up and a comment. All of these things help more people find this show and to continue growing and bringing you awesome guests each and every week. Now, without further ado, let's beam in this week's guest. Computer, access interview file. And welcome back to Trek Untold. And now joining us on the other side of the screen, he's joining us all the way from the exotic land of Canada, I believe it's pronounced. He is everyone's favorite Aenar. We are joined today by Mr. Bruce Horak. Bruce, how are you today?
I'm very well, thanks, Matthew. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm very excited to talk to you today. I fell in love with Hemmer. I think so many Trekkies out there did. But you've done so many other great things outside of just Star Trek, and I'm very excited to have you share them with my audience today.
Thank you.
So I'd love to kind of just get down and nitty-gritty right away. And I'd like to ask you the question I ask all my guests first. Bruce, what's your earliest memory of Star Trek? Were you a fan growing up?
Yeah, I sure was a fan growing up and all the way until probably the day I die. I'm a Trekkie for life. My dad was a high school English teacher and a huge science fiction nerd. He actually wrote his master's degree on creating a science fiction class for high school kids.
Wow.
So that's how much he loves sci-fi. And so I'm the youngest of four boys, and all of us were instilled with that love. The whole family, we would gather around the TV and watch original series and reruns and do our William Shatner impressions around the house. And just really loved it from the time I was very young. And it was a very special bond between my dad and I, for sure. When he retired from being an English teacher, that's when Next Generation was, I think, maybe in reruns. And so every day at like 5 o'clock, I'd come home from college or whatever, and Dad would be on the couch watching his Next Generation. And just always loved it. Always loved it. One of my earliest memories of Star Trek. Well, I have two. One was also Dad was a huge comic collector, comic books.
Nice.
Oh, yeah. He had in his study where he would go to mark papers, quote unquote, after school. It was floor to ceiling comic books and old like comic pages from the 30s and 40s, those big print pages of, Prince Valiant or Terry and the Pirates and stuff like that. And he also had original series photo novels, I think is what they were called. There were three.
I know those, yeah.
Little box set, and there was like The Trouble with Tribbles and City on the Edge of Forever, and I can't remember what the third one was. Probably Space Seed or something. But anyway, I just remember just poring over those novels and just it was a storyboard, little stills from the show.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And I also vaguely remember, and this could be a false memory, but I do vaguely remember going to see Star Trek the Motion Picture in the theater. So it would have been like 4 or 5 years old, maybe, getting dragged along to watch that and falling asleep.
I mean, to be fair, most adults still fall asleep during that movie, but yeah.
What was that? Was that 1980 that movie came out, or 79?
The first one was 79, so right on the cusp.
Yeah, so I would have been really little if that memory is correct, or maybe I was just told that's that movie was terrible, it's boring. But then Wrath of Khan came out, and my God, I mean, I followed all the movies, and that's the long way around to yes and.
And so your dad had some like serious nerd cred, by the way. Like that is amazing that he was like that into Star Trek that he actually had a whole course about it. That's amazing.
Oh yeah, he had the comic books. I don't remember who the publisher was of the Star Trek comics. Photo novels. Any movie comics. Just right into it. He never collected the toys. Dad was adamant against toys.
He has to draw the line somewhere.
The art. It was all about the art and the story in these pages, not about plastic toys and doodads.
He would not have liked my collection. So, Bruce, let's kind of follow up on that note here. I'd like to hear a little bit more about where you were born, who your parents were, what they did, and what little Bruce wanted to be when he grew up.
Well, little Bruce was kind of always destined for a career in the arts of some sort. As I mentioned, Dad was a high school English teacher and a comic nerd. He also had a minor in cartooning and drawing, so he was an artist. And Mom also wrote. She wrote like for newspapers and magazines. She raised four boys, so that was pretty impressive on a teacher's salary. I grew up in Calgary, Alberta, Canada,
nice.
And in a little suburb. Southwood, and youngest of four boys, and we were all really encouraged from the time we were very little to express ourselves in creative ways. So there was a piano in the basement that we kind of go down and pound on, and we all took music lessons and art classes if we were interested. And I was always drawing and doodling all the way in school. So that was a passion of mine, was illustrating things. I sort of learned more from drawing the cartoon of whatever event we were to learn about. And I was a bit of a class clown, so I tended to, there's a George Carlin quote about deprive others of their education. I definitely related to that. Getting a laugh out of my classmates was just like the greatest feeling ever. So yeah, that all the way through school, I remember when I was in grade 3 or grade 4, local theater company came to our elementary school and set up in the gymnasium and did this play. And after the play, I just thought, that's what I want to do. I want to write stories. I want to get on stage and act, and I want to, create that kind of life for myself. So I started writing scripts pretty early on. I think I actually wrote a short film when I was in grade 5 or 6, and enlisted a friend of mine had like a VHS camera, which was
wow.
like, oh my, actually, and the sound was terrible and all that. You put the tape in and the battery would last for like 4 minutes, and then you had to recharge. But
that is not an exaggeration either.
No. And we made a little short film. And to edit the movie, we had to get 2 VHS machines and play. It was like a minute and a half movie, but that was kind of my first experience, pretty young. And all the way through school, I just wrote and painted and did music and explored all things creative. And by the time I got out of high school, I had to narrow down my options. So I cut out music from one of my options, and then eventually I cut out art. And the last thing that lasted was drama class. And my grade 12 year, I actually took an extra semester of drama so that I could just keep my feet in it. And I ended up directing the second semester main stage show, which was what was it? David Campton's The Life and Death of Almost Everybody, I think, was the first show I ever directed. It's it's such I don't know if you know his writing at all. David Campion, very funny Brit. And I just got the bug for pursuing that career, making a life out of the theatrical.
And this is just my ignorance of your homeland, but my only knowledge and reference point of Calgary is basically the Calgary Stampede and Bret the Hitman Hart. That's about it. That's all I know about Calgary.
Yeah.
I feel like those two things would be very far away from your orbit of knowledge and area.
Well, no, I mean, being a Calgarian, like, you could not escape the Stampede and Stampede culture. That's just... It's in everything. I actually ended up playing in a marching band. I was the snare drummer in one of the snare drummers in the Calgary Roundup band. And one of our, big things was the Stampede Parade, which happens, first day of the Stampede every year. This massive parade that goes through downtown, and the floats and the marching bands and all that. So I have marched in the Stampede Parade. I have that Calgary badge somewhere. And of course, attending some Stampede wrestling, or at least watching it on television. My dad, again, this all comes back to Carl Horak, but he was a huge wrestling fan.
Oh, good.
He loved wrestling. Yeah. So, in the meantime and in between time, it's another edition of Stampede Wrestling. Yeah, that's one for your Calgary listeners out there.
I got that reference. I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, outside of your, I don't know quite what they call it, but we call it America High School. After you're done with high school, what performing arts school did you go to? Or did you go to a performing arts school?
I did. I took a year off after high school and worked for a theater company in Calgary called Alberta Theater Projects. And I was an apprentice there, basically an intern. And I got to work in every department of the theater and just really get to see the behind the scenes of what goes into actually producing these plays and maintaining a company like that, which was amazing. I got so much experience there. And then while I was working at that theater company, I met one of my playwriting mentors, a guy named Dan Libman, and I had a really kind of frank conversation with him about what I should do after my year at Alberta Theater Projects. And I had been accepted to Concordia University in Montreal to go to the playwriting stream there, or I'd also been accepted to go to Mount Royal College, which was a 2-year, very immersive theater program, which fed directly into Shakespeare in the Park in Calgary, which was a summertime festival of outdoor Shakespeare plays, primarily put on by students from the theater schools in Canada. And having this conversation with Dan, he basically laid out, it's like, you're going to meet people at whatever school you go to, you're going to start to develop the roots that's going to become your career. The people that you go to school with, they may go on and they may hire you in 15 years. Or in the city that you're in, you're going to start to meet the locals, and you're going to meet the people that are going to be a part of your career for forever. And he said, just what kind of experience do you want? Do you want to be sitting behind a desk writing, or do you want to be in an immersive theater program where you're going to be designing lights and building costumes and sets and just getting all of that experience? Initially, I just wanted to be a writer, but by the time I finished my time at Mount Royal College, I realized like I wanted to do it all. It wasn't just about finding one narrow stream and staying in that. It's like, no, there's so much more to the world of theater than just the one craft and one skill. So I got very excited by that at Mount Royal and produced my own shows for years after that to this day.
Well, yeah, let's spend some time talking about some of those shows. I had a real wonderful time looking up more about you and learning more about the shows you've done in Canada. And I'd like to start things off by asking about a show that I believe you did at the Fringe Festival called This Is Cancer. And this sounded like clearly it's a very, very personal show to you. It sounded very fascinating, and just like hearing about what the show is like, it sounds like a real interesting experience. As Spock would say, a really fascinating experience, but no joke. It sounded like a really amazing theatrical experience to have. So can you tell my audience a little bit about that show?
Yes. So This Is Cancer is, it's a theatrical experience. So in the play, let's call it a play or show, Cancer, the living embodiment of the disease cancer, has decided that humanity is in love with him. They run for cancer. They raise money for cancer, pink M&Ms campaigns and all this. Cancer's everywhere. And so Cancer has decided to put on a show for what he believes to be his adoring public. And I play Cancer. I'm wearing a head to toe gold lame speed skating outfit, which is very tight. And it's stuffed with lumps and bumps all over it. So I have this sort of grotesque body. Cancer has two blacked out eyes, like he's been punched in the face, and really horrible teeth. Cancer also speaks with a British accent, and he's sort of a cross between what we used to say, like Mick Jagger, David Bowie, Eddie Izzard. Just like he's just really charming, and he makes drinks for the audience, and he sings a big opening number, and there's a rock band with him. In my idealized version of the show, I've got a 3-piece rock band called the Inoperables who play with me. And it's this huge sort of rock and roll spectacle where Cancer is putting on a show. And he's got a black book, and in the black book are all the names of people that he's ever had a relationship with. And you come to realize over the course of the show that when Cancer falls in love with somebody, they get sick and die. But Cancer is immortal. So, and he also just falls in love randomly and very quickly. And he goes through all the list of famous people in his black book, like Sammy Davis Jr. And he does a little Sammy Davis Jr. number because he loves Sammy so much with the rock band. They back him up on a version of Mr. Bojangles. And he tells some Cancer stand up about Lance Armstrong, and kind of going on about that. And then eventually Cancer. So as the audience, I got to back up a bit, but as the audience is coming into the theater, there are all over the walls, there are these sheets of paper that say Cancer, and there's a line underneath and it says fill in the blank, and there's pens everywhere. So the audience can write all over these pages as they're coming into the theater. And over the course of the, 800 shows that I've done of This Is Cancer, inevitably somebody will write something horrible like Cancer licks balls, or, Cancer's an asshole, or whatever. So during the show, Cancer pulls out one of these pages and he's like, look what I found on the way in here. He's like, this isn't fair. I mean, come on. And he sort of tries to defend himself, and eventually the audience tell him to go fuck himself. So Cancer gets upset and tries to quit, but the stage manager comes on and says, no, you've signed a contract. You have to do it. You have to do the full show. You're under contract. So Cancer comes back all pouty. He's like, you guys hate me. Blah, blah. So he brings out his book and he starts going through it, trying to comfort himself with all the people that he's loved. And he finds in the book, the name of my dad, Carl Horak. And Cancer starts telling the story of how he fell in love with Carl when Carl was a baby. He fell in love with one of Carl's eyes, and Carl lost the eye. And then years later, Cancer came back into Carl's life and took him. So Cancer ends up telling my story from Cancer's point of view. And so about halfway through the show, it kind of flips into a more personal journey. And Yeah, cancer basically goes through the 5 stages of grief. He goes through anger, bargaining, denial, acceptance, and depression, and all that. So by the end of the show, he ends up falling in love with an audience member by accident. Oh, I'm so sorry. And oh, well, you can't. This is horrible. You're going to have to come home with cancer, and this is going to be awful. But we decided, listen, we're not going to end the show that way. So cancer gives the audience member a big foam pool noodle, and they're given the opportunity to beat the living crap out of him at the end of the show.
Very cathartic.
This is cancer. Yeah.
I mean, I love that. It's such a great framing device too. My initial reaction to it was it kind of reminds you of more contemporary times. I guess you could say it's like 700 Sundays with Billy Crystal, but yours is like much more of a performance piece as well and very interactive, which really makes it stand out.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's I do. So at the end of the show, I take a short break and then I come back and out of costume and out of character and do a not a feedback session, just kind of an informal chat with the audience, anyone who wants to stay afterwards. And honestly, that part of the show has been so rewarding for me as a performer because the impact of it becomes just so apparent and people going through that experience. And sometimes I have audience members who are in the midst of their relationship with cancer, their current relationship with cancer. And oftentimes I have caregivers who come to see the show and their journey is very, very different. And it's different depending on where I do it. I had the chance to do This Is Cancer in the US a couple of times.
Yeah.
I did it at a theater in Portland, Oregon, and I also performed it at the Ars Nova Theater in New York. And because Canada has universal health care, the word cancer isn't an immediate bankruptcy notice. And when I did the show in Portland, this came up in the Q&A, and the culture around taking care of one another and knowing that if I'm walking down the street in Canada and I have a heart attack and collapse on the sidewalk, that A, there will be somebody there to help me, and B, it's not going to completely bankrupt me and my family, and B, not just a death sentence, but potentially like an eviction notice.
Yeah.
And so even just saying the word cancer, I mean, I get the audience at the beginning, like they shout for cancer and they cheer for cancer and things like that. And it's much, I wouldn't say it's much lighter in Canada, but it has a different intonation than it did when I was down in the States. So I found that really interesting. The advancements that have come in cancer research and cancer treatments, even since I started doing the show. I think my first performance of it was in 2006. And even since then, we've seen such advancements in it that our relationship to the disease is evolving and is different. And yeah, I look forward to the next time I could do the show. I think it'll be really enlightening.
My family has been hit by cancer in many ways. My mom's had cancer. My dad is still battling his as well. And so, it's definitely interesting to hear that in one side of the world, it's just a completely different take on it. Cause yeah, you're right. The way it's looked at here in America, it feels like it's just dramatically different, for a number of reasons. Now for our audience members who aren't super familiar with you yet, Bruce, would you mind kind of telling us about your cancer story?
Sure. So I was diagnosed with bilateral retinoblastoma, which is cancer of the eyes on the retina. I was just over a year old, and it was found in both of my eyes. So my right eye was removed completely because there were so many tumors on the retina, and they had to remove it right away. And in my left eye, there were just 3 little tumors on the retina. And what was done, I was flown to Toronto, and they blasted my eye with radiation, and scar tissue developed over most of the retina where the tumors were. But I have a very small window in my retina that I can see through that's unscarred, leaving me with about 9% vision or so. A cataract developed in my left eye when I was about 4.5, so I had cataract surgery. And so that has left me, with certainly a diminished field of vision, but also diminished acuity as well. So that's been my normal. I tend to wear contact lens for some correction, or very heavy bifocal glasses.
Yeah, I heard an interview that you did a while back with Daniela Sioni, which is a great interview. I recommend folks who want to learn more about Bruce, check that one out too. But yeah, like one of the things I found interesting was like you were talking to her about your eyes, and I think your right eye is like an artificial eye, right? Like that's
correct,
amazing.
yeah.
I know it's a weird thing to say, Bruce, but that's some amazing science stuff right there. I'm just like blown away hearing that.
Well, I appreciate it. It's I get to wear a work of art with me everywhere I go. Yeah, I mean, not to get all gross or whatever, but I get a new.
Oh no, please get gross.
I do get a new artificial eye every few years. I think the term limit on an artificial eye is about 7 years or so, maybe, or 5 years. So yeah, I get to have this new work of art, and I have quite a growing eye collection.
Well, I have no good segues for that. Someone's going to ask me about something else now, but yeah, but thank you for sharing that stuff. I mean, yeah, it's really cool to hear all of that. And we'll definitely get back into some more of those things as we go on with your art. But I do want to talk about a show you did with certain Star Trek alumni that we've had on this podcast. And that would be a show you did called Blind Date. And I believe you did that with David Benjamin Tomlinson, who we had on the show. Loved talking to him. What a cool guy. Tell us a little about Blind Date and your memories of doing that show.
Blind Date, yes. So this is the brainchild of Rebecca Northen, and she plays a French clown named Mimi who gets stood up on for a blind date. And so she chooses a willing participant from the audience, and together they go on a blind date. It starts in a cafe, and then it just can go anywhere at that point. After the cafe closes, the check gets paid, and where do you go? And I worked on that show as support, basically. So there's a waiter in the cafe, and then wherever they leave after that, there's a couple of us who work backstage changing up the scenery. So if they want to go to a park, then we improvise and we put out a park. And maybe there's a jogger in the park, or maybe there's a cop who comes by and says, the park's closed, you got to go somewhere else, or whatever, to forward the narrative, as it were. And that show toured quite extensively, and actually continues to tour to this day. And there have been a number of clowns, French clowns, who've stepped into the role of Mimi. As initially it was support for Rebecca, and then eventually they were just developing their own clowns. And from the very early stages of doing that show, Rebecca would get asked if she ever chooses a woman from the audience, and she said, "Well, I'm straight. It's certainly up for consideration if we could, if there was another clown that was interested in doing that." And eventually, there's a theater company in Toronto called Buddies in Bad Times, and they put some work into developing the queer version of Blind Date, which is where David Benjamin Tomlinson comes into it. He played Mathieu, the French clown. Yep. And Julie Orton played Mimi, but the queer version of Mimi. And we did a run of that at Buddies in Bad Times to develop the queer version of Blind Date. And it was just an extraordinary experience. I worked as support on that, again, playing waiters and police officers and next door neighbors and things like that. It's a remarkable show. It takes kind of the interview style show into a whole new world where, inevitably you end up falling in love with the person from the audience. And, it's full of heart. It's unpredictable, and, a wild night out at the theater.
Trek Untold will return momentarily.
Trek Untold is sponsored by Triple Fiction Productions. Celebrating 15 years in business in 2023, TFP creates 3D printed Star Trek and sci-fi inspired items that fit into any collection. Whether you're a cosplayer who wants a Starfleet phaser, a Bajoran tricorder, or a Klingon dagger, or a toy collector looking for that special accessory or diorama to make your figures truly stand out, Triple Fiction Productions has exactly what you need. And for you figure fanatics, that includes products that are the perfect size for Galoob, Mego, Playmates, and everything in between. All products are 3D printed in the US, with new designs constantly being updated on their website. Repeat customers can sign up for TFP's loyalty program for free, where the more you order, the more discounts you receive. TFP also has a pay what you want section, where clearance or misprinted items are available at a discounted price. Best of all, every product can be shipped worldwide. As a special bonus for listeners of this show, Trek Untold has a special discount code just for you. Enter Untold10 at checkout for 10% off of all orders with no minimum purchase required. That's 10% off using Untold10. To see all of their products, head to triple-fictionproductions.net. Or to stay up to date on their newest products, find them on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Triple Fiction Productions, where something is only impossible until it happens.
Hey, I'm Licia Nav, aka Ensign Sonia Gomez from Star Trek TNG, and now Captain Sonia Gomez on lower decks with her own ship, the Archimedes. Yay! I finally got a promotion after 25 years. So anyway, I'm here to talk about drivebydogooders.org. It's a little charity I run where we go to the outskirts of Skid Row, and from our car windows, we hand out basic human essentials like water, wipes, cold stream cheese, socks, tarps, masks, t-shirts, things to keep people warm. So we just think that everyone deserves clean water, some protein, and a way to clean themselves, especially during Corona. We also hand out masks to those who really, really need it, who live in tents on the street, mainly the disabled and elderly who have a really hard time getting to services. And we do all of this with no agenda, just pure giving, no overhead. If you'd like to go to the website and donate, it's 100% tax deductible. And if you click on the donate button, you can go right to the $35 option and pick a signed autograph picture of either the Star Trek The Next Generation or Lower Decks, or Total Recall, where I played the three-breasted mutant hooker on Mars, and that's the X-rated version. Put in the comments section your address and anything you'd like me to write, and I'll personally inscribe it and mail it off to you immediately. And again, that's drivebydogooders.org. Captain Sonia Gomez, signing off.
Yeah, I really just love all these, like, I don't want to keep some interactive performances, but really these explorative performances that you're doing on the theater. Because a lot of times I talk to folks in the show, they're often stage actors, and they'll be doing Shakespeare, which you've done. They'll be doing more traditional classical style of theater where you're performing in front of an audience. But everything you're doing is very much about having a conversation with the audience, having an actual dialogue back and forth with who you're basically presenting yourself to. And that's a pretty unique kind of way to perform.
It's really one of my favorites. Because I think every audience that comes is different and unique. And when I go and see a show, I like to be invited into that world. And I love it. And for me, like, that was really the development of my painting career, was sitting with people and doing their portraits and having these connections. And I realized, very early on that spending an hour and a half or 2 hours with somebody and chatting and getting to know them, it's the best. It's just the best.
And by the way, Bruce, thank you so much for taking care of my hot garbage segues, because you just did this one for me, because I wanted to start talking about your art, in fact. So
great.
Wonderful timing. You're so good at that. Yeah. So yeah, I know you've been on this painting journey in particular for the last decade or so, where what you're doing now is portraits. So I'd love to hear a little bit about when you discovered this part of painting that you wanted to explore, and what you're doing with it.
Well, back in, I've always painted and sketched and drawn.
Droodled, maybe?
Droodled. I've been known to droodle occasionally.
We all do when we get older.
Yeah. So it's always kind of been in the background, but it never really took a forefront for me until a friend of mine asked me how I see. He had known me since college. He'd gone to theater school with me. He'd done plays with me. But I learned to fake being more sighted than I am. I don't think I've ever really mastered looking fully sighted, but more sighted than I actually am. And so my friend Brandon asked me, like, how do you see the world? And I decided to paint his portrait to try to capture the way that I see. And I just got addicted to this portrait thing. It was very early on, just even sitting and chatting with Brandon and telling him about my eyesight. I had been very shy about sharing that stuff when I was younger. I would shake, and I would get all nervous about having to talk about how I see and those limitations. But with Brandon, because I was working on this portraiture, and because the subject was just open, it seemed like, all questions are on the table, and all subjects are on the table and are welcome here. It broke down the act of painting into like really manageable things for me. It was having a conversation with somebody, which I can do naturally. It was just putting some paint on a canvas and don't worry about getting it right. Just try to paint what you see. And that seemed manageable to me. It didn't seem like this unachievable, unattainable goal. It's like, no, just be present, talk to Brandon, paint what you see. And a year later, I had done 365 portraits and I just couldn't stop. And it eventually turned into doing landscape work. And I found myself, whenever I was faced with a moment of boredom or anxiety or whatever, I could turn that part of my brain off and just paint what I saw and be present. Eventually that portrait series turned into another theatrical endeavor.
When doesn't it?
As all spokes seem to lead on the same wheel to more theater. But yeah, I now do a show called Assassinating Thompson, where I paint a portrait of the entire audience, which is, I'm just actually about to take it on tour. I leave on Wednesday to go to Manitoba and do 25 performances in 36 days, all over Manitoba and Northern Ontario with Assassinating Thompson. And I will be painting one large portrait every night of whoever comes to see the show. And while I paint, I tell the story of how I lost my eyesight, how I became a painter. I tell the story of sitting with Brandon. I talk a little bit about my dad. And I also solve the mystery of who killed Tom Thompson, who was a Canadian artist who disappeared under mysterious circumstances in 1917. He paddled off in a very true Canadian fashion. He got in a canoe and paddled off across a lake and disappeared. And a week later, they found his body. There's this ongoing Canadian mystery of who killed him or how he died or, the various theories. So I solve it. Finally, we can put it to rest in the show Assassinating Thompson. And I get to marry like my favorite things. I get to story tell and paint and sit and be present with people and chat and connect with an audience. It's a real joy. And then at the end of the show, I turn the painting around and then I sell it to the highest bidder in the audience, which is a whole other trip because I get to be an auctioneer. And then we pack up and go to the next town. On this particular tour, I'm donating all the proceeds from the sale of the paintings to an organization called Canadian Guide Dogs for the Blind, which provides training in animals for people with who need guide dogs. And that's what I'm doing for the next month and a half. in the hopefully not too freezing cold of Northern Ontario. It just sounds cold to say it, doesn't it?
I mean, to me, all of Canada is just like a frozen wasteland, but I don't know better. So one of these days I'll get up there and correct that. But something I want to kind of dive into a little bit more is, it reminds me of a story I heard about, I believe it was Monet, and how, especially as he got older, his visibility, his vision got worse and stuff. Yeah. And towards the end, he basically has assistants painting for him, but he'd have to basically do it within a certain time period because the sun would be going down. It'd be harder for him to see. And so that would also affect, how the painting would look, because a big part of that painting is trying to get consistent time of day if you're doing an outdoor shot like he was quite often. So, in your case, we talked about how you have like this 9% vision, right? So, what do you see? How do you see? I mean, I'd love to hear what that actually looks like. If you can describe that for us.
Yeah. So the way I describe it in the show is I have the audience put their hand over their right eye, cover that up because mine's artificial. And with their left hand, you make a little tube, a tiny little straw, pinch it off, and then look down through that. So that restricts your field of vision to about 9%. And then as you're looking down that straw, imagine looking through murky water, like an old lava lamp where things are floating in the field of vision, because I have a lot of floaters, detritus in my vitreous. And which really sounds technical, doesn't it? I'm doing Star Trek jargon now.
Detritus, that's a techno battle.
So yeah, that's kind of best way to describe it. Also, I have extreme light sensitivity, so going from a bright spot into a dark spot, it basically just becomes a wash for me. Actually, now as a result of this extreme tunnel vision, I'm constantly scanning in order to figure out where things are as much as I can see when I'm moving up a sidewalk, at least before I got my white cane, which saved my life on a number of occasions. But generally with like shoulders up and head down and just sort of focus on the spot that's ahead of me as I'm moving. But that's changing now that I've got a white cane. The cane actually does that all for me, acts as my peripheral vision.
What's interesting to me is, like typically when we talk about painting and art in general, it's like the observation of life. And that is the key word in art and impressionist art and realist art, especially it's the observation of life. But for someone like yourself who has more limited ability to do that, it's real fascinating just to understand the way you're looking at things. And I guess if you don't mind, I'd kind of like to maybe get a little more description of how you see art around you, let's say, because I'd love to hear like what you see if you look at like Starry Night by Picasso, or if you look at a Rembrandt painting, more traditional, Rembrandt style painting, or even like something more abstract like a Mondrian. Like, how do you ingest artwork?
Great question. Well, first thing is that because of all the damage I've had done to my eye, I see like an aura around everything. It's part of the refraction of light. So the first thing that and if I'm sitting and doing a portrait, for instance, when I'm looking at your face, I will see this aura of light. And so I will start a painting with that color or that sort of broken up texture. And then I have to look in small increments. And so the work that I'm creating doesn't necessarily take a big step back, doesn't have like one uniform shape to it. It looks like almost pixelated art that's been slightly augmented, in the same way that if I'm looking at, like a more classical work, that I'm going to be ingesting it in very small segments. When I take a big step back, everything just kind of becomes hot mush is how I describe it. It's all blurry and broken up. I have to get quite close and I have to look at it in smaller segments. It's very impressionistic. I love Monet, especially for the later work, because I understand that he had maybe glaucoma or a cataract going.
Yes.
So there's almost like refractions of light. And that's very much how I see. There was an installation of the water lilies that I saw a number of years ago. Some of his larger work that he used to lay out on his studio floor, the big paintings. And as soon as I saw that, I'm like, oh, that's how I see. That kind of that notion. I also really love pointillism for that same reason.
Yeah,
Seurat, that work. I love it because it captures certainly an element of how I see. I've done I'm getting close now to 700 portraits, and I feel like there isn't one individual portrait that I look at and go, that got it. That's everything in there. But when I install the work, I often do 200 or 300 of my 8x10s in one large grid. And when I put those all together and take a big step back, that's when I get the sensation of, that's it. they all have to be there. They all have to be in a certain order and certain kind of arrangement on the wall. And I get to take a step back, and that's when I get the feeling of maybe capturing it. But there has to be some audio in there as well, because I'm a very audio learner, whatever that sense is. Auditory learner.
That sounds like a word. Yeah, I'll go with that one.
Sure.
Yeah, it's curious to hear if I can kind of paraphrase your style a little bit. It's kind of like you're starting with the negative space and then kind of layering within it, which is like, that's such a unique way to create art. And I've done stuff like that before, and it's difficult because kind of interpreting negative space is a challenge, I think. It's because it really is. It's everything that's around you. It's not the subject itself. So you're basically building with what's around the person and then working inwards. And as part of your process, I believe, right, you're doing the interviews, right? So how much of the interview then informs you of what this person looks like? Is that a part of your artwork as well?
Definitely. And from very early stages, I would actually record my portrait sittings and oftentimes go back and listen to the audio as I'm working on the piece. I think, and this was one of the things I was, when I was researching Tom Thompson and his work and some of his approaches, he said that color can affect your emotion. And if you can kind of put yourself in an emotional space, there'll be a color that seems most obvious to that. People often, very broadly say, oh yeah, red is anger. I mean, that's very broad, but, there's a sensation certainly as I'm working in color that I start to feel that bit, and oftentimes listening to an interview, I'll go back to that feeling again, and then the color will seem most obvious from that feeling. Yeah, audio is a huge way for me to be transported. I have an actual audio clip of my dad that when I hear it I feel his presence more. There's that haunted sensation of listening to his voice that I just simply don't get when I look at a photograph. Photograph evokes other things, but for me, the audio is just like, oh, he's in the room with me. He had such as soon as I hear the voice, it's like, oh yeah, that's what that guy was like. I can't necessarily create a photorealistic impression of my dad in my mind from hearing the audio, but there's memories, there's places, there's smells, there's emotions that I just go with. And so for me, now as I do my portrait installations, I accompany them with audio clips of the people describing themselves. A question I will often ask my subjects as I'm doing their portraits is, how do you describe yourself to someone who can't see? And I really, I love that question. The pause after it gets asked, the question that then gets asked as a result of the question, which is usually, do you mean physically or in some other way? That's generally the first question. And then just where it goes from there, everyone's description of themselves, how they see themselves, how they want to be perceived, what they leave in, what they leave out, the lightness or the heaviness in the voice as they're considering it and responding to it. And then just what that question prompts, in terms of the conversation that follows it, I think is just, it's intriguing to me. And I've had some, beautifully poetic responses to how to describe yourself to someone who can't see, to just like the most mundane, like, oh, I'm, 5'10", I'm a dude.
That's really interesting. I mean, that's so now I'm afraid to even do the portrait myself, but yeah. And for anybody who's actually curious about doing this, they can actually visit brucehorak.com. They could sign up to get one of these done. There's, I think, 3 different ways to do it, right, Bruce? That's my way to say shameless plug. Bruce, go for it.
Thank you. Yes, I'm now sitting over Zoom. So I've been doing portraits of people from all over the world, which is fantastic. There are 3 different levels. Yeah. So there's kind of the basic portrait sitting, which is, I believe, 30 minutes. And there's no audio recording. It's just a 30-minute chat. We hang out. I'll take some screenshots, and then I do a digital portrait that gets sent to you. So you get to keep that. Or there's, let me think now. I think there's an hour-long sitting, which includes a chat. We hang out. I do some sketches, and then you receive an audio section from the sitting plus a digital PDF and like a time-lapse movie of the portrait being created. And then the third tier is all of that plus an 8x10 canvas, hand-painted acrylic on canvas portrait that gets mailed to you.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's keeping me very busy, and I'm getting to meet people from all over the world. And yeah, I just love it. Star Trek has certainly opened up that world. People learning about me and my work, and just getting to chat with people about Star Trek is kind of the best ever.
I don't disagree about that at all. And yeah, folks, definitely check it out. Go to brucehorak.com if you want to learn more about that, how to sign up for it. I believe it starts at $100. It works its way up through the different tiers, and it's worth every penny. I mean, honestly, and that's the thing why I love talking to artists on the show, especially is because I feel like a lot of my audience might not be as exposed to this part of the arts, and they don't understand the value of art. So, getting $100 thing, getting to spend time with Bruce Horak, I mean, that's worth more than $100, folks. So, I mean, go for it. You're going to have a piece of real unique art you're going to love forever. Now, Bruce, one last thing here about the artwork too I want to talk about is, as we mentioned throughout this, you are a cancer survivor. Your father, though, passed away from his esophageal cancer. And, it's definitely a heavy burden to have to shoulder as a survivor, because it's, watching a parent die from cancer, a thing that you've been battling through yourself. I mean, so just looking at all the work you've done, because so much of it is very personal and it's very intrinsic because of literally the way you see the world. So, having your father pass away from cancer, I mean, how did that affect not just your artwork, but the way you thought about your life and saw it through art?
Wow. Losing my dad, this is coming up on 20 years, this August. I mean, everything changed at that point. He actually passed away on my birthday, my 29th birthday. And, I mean, what are the odds, right? Like 1 in 365. But he had an incredible sense of humor. In the last year of his life, he just imparted so much wisdom that I have taken not only into my life, but into my art as well, and my relationships. One of the things he said to me in that last year was, perhaps we can get to a point where we no longer grieve what is lost, but we celebrate what remains. Mm. And he was talking about, what I think within the context, he was actually showing me the arrangements he'd made for his own funeral. Imagine that. He wrote his own obituary. He made all the arrangements for his own funeral. In the last year of his life, he and my mom spent hours in the study as he was packing up comic books and shipping them off, because he sold off his whole collection and left all the money to my mom to take care of her. And he spent that whole last year just basically going through his life and reconciling with it. And he said, I don't want you to be thinking about, what we've lost here, but celebrate each other, like enjoy each other, like take care of each other, celebrate what you have, and celebrate the good times that you've lived through. And that was hard for sure. Like losing him on my birthday, I just thought, like, wow, this sucks. Like my birthday is ruined for the rest of my life. But it has become a marking of transition. It's another year that I've gone through. It's another year without him, but it's also another year that my relationship with him has deepened, has changed. He appears in all of my shows pretty much. I mean, I talk about him in Assassinating Thompson. I talk about him in This Is Cancer. I'll talk about him on every podcast probably, and certainly within my art. A big inspiration for me painting and trying to capture how I see was wanting to paint a portrait of my dad. When he was diagnosed, I thought a lot about like celebrating what I have. What do I have? I have 9% vision. Instead of grieving 91% that I don't have and trying to hide it, it's like, no, I want to celebrate this. And when I was diagnosed, it was my dad who stepped in and said, you got to find some way to save some of his eyesight. They were going to remove both my eyes. And he's like, there's got to be a way. They did all this research and they found this doctor in Toronto and blasted my eye with radiation, and 9% remained because my dad kind of stepped in. So I started painting, and I wanted to paint his portrait to show him what he had given me. And to this day, I keep working on the portraiture because it's a celebration of what I have. And to share it is a pretty rare gift. And it has, it certainly started out as a bit of a selfish act of, I want to figure this out. How do I see? And there's elements where I'm still learning a lot about how I see the world and how I move through the world. But the unintended consequence of that has been the inspiration. There are people with disabilities, people with visual impairments who have seen my show, have tried painting, have tried writing, have tried performing, have gotten on stage for the first time, and have gotten back to me and said, yeah, I wouldn't have done that had I not seen you do it. And I'm like, whoa, I mean, that's the greatest accomplishment that I can think of, bar none, to actually get to witness and be a part of somebody else's creative journey in a positive way. That's the best. And I've been so fortunate that that Star Trek really has opened up that door on a global scale. I was performing for 10 and 15 people in beer tents across Canada, and then suddenly I'm afforded a much larger community as a result of that. And I've been hearing from people all over the world of all shapes and sizes. And I'm really grateful for that opportunity. Mm-hmm.
Some people take their grief and just kind of hide away with it. Other people build shrines with it. And that's what you've done. And you've really been able to share those gifts, like you're saying, and kind of just spread the message of your dad and keep him alive and keep him in the heart of other people. Don't even know that they're probably in their hearts now. Yeah. So that's very admirable.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, Matthew from Trek Untold here, and I want to tell you about a big Star Trek event happening in May in New York City. Trek Long Island is kicking off in Hauppauge, Long Island for the weekend of May 20th and 21st. This is a show for fans, made by fans. They've got celebrities, scientists, podcasters, and so much more jam-packed in 2 days of out-of-this-world fun. Trek Long Island has a phenomenal guest list, including some rare gems that scarcely do public appearances. They have guests from Star Trek Discovery, like the amazing Doug Jones, Oded Fehr, and David Ajala. Star Trek Picard's Avon Evagora and Issa Briones, Strange New Worlds' Bruce Horak, and many more from modern Trek shows. But don't worry, they've also got guests from the original series movies and episodes, such as Robin Curtis and Barbara Luna, as well as J.G. Hertzler from DS9. Plus, a host of behind-the-scenes contributors will be appearing virtually, including Michael Westmore, Doug Drexler, the Okudas, and an in-person appearance by composer and sound designer Alan Howarth. There's going to be panels with Star Trek authors and historians, scientists breaking down the science of Star Trek, visual effects artists explaining how the magic gets made, and so much more, in addition to panels from fans like you. Trek Long Island has something for everyone, and that includes all ages, as there will be children's entertainment and activities, and evening cabarets and late-night comedy for the adults. This event is going to be 2 Trek-filled days you do not want to miss. So prepare your away team for May 20th and May 21st for New York's best new fan-run Trek convention, Trek Long Island. Check out TrekLongIsland.com for more details on how to pick up tickets and attend. Trek Long Island, boldly going and going kindly. All right, so Bruce, let's beam into our Star Trek discussion now. You were Lieutenant Hemmer in the first season of Strange New Worlds, the chief engineer of the Enterprise. So,
Yes, sir.
What can you tell me about the audition process? And I'm wondering if 2 things here, if you were auditioning specifically for this character or for someone else, and if you know for Hemmer, if they were auditioning exclusively for visually impaired actors, or was it open to folks without disabilities?
Well, when the casting call went out, it was specifically for performers with visual impairments, or they were given preference anyway. That's what they were looking for, and it was specifically for the character of Hemmer. It was during all the lockdowns, so I did everything over Zoom in my kitchen, and it was a pretty extensive process. I did I think maybe 3 or 4 different sessions, and it was to read to do the scene with where Hemmer meets Uhura for the first time, and Spock is there, and it was. I leapt at the chance right away just because it was a new Star Trek, and I just got super excited about that. I don't think that Uhura's name was even in the script, so I didn't know that this was the character, but it was definitely Hemmer in there and Spock. So it definitely got very excited about that. And reading about that I was a Aenar, I went and looked at the episodes of Enterprise that the Aenar show up in just to see if I can get some tips from what the other actors had done.
Yeah, and I should add too, I said disability, so apologies for that, but visually impaired actors, you're the first legally blind actor to be cast and part of the main crew of a Star Trek show. I mean, I don't know, my knowledge of the franchise, it feels a little low here, but do you know if there were any other folks who were visually impaired that appeared in Star Trek, or are you just one of the first, period?
Don't know if there was anyone else. To be honest, I don't know if there were other actors with disabilities. I don't think they've ever been on the main crew.
All right, so let's talk about now. You got the gig, you booked the role, you are now Hemmer, but you got to now go through the makeup process. So talk to me about how arduous that was. The smile on your face says a lot right there.
Yeah. I mean, I really had no idea what this character was even going to look like until the first day of. I think it was the camera test. The day that we did the camera test was when they put all of the makeup and all the prosthetics on me, and that took 5.5 hours. And there was two technicians, Chris Bridgers and Shane Zander, were the 2 artists who put the piece together, and it was all based on the design that had come. I guess it was created somewhere in California. It was extensive. It was a long time to be in that chair, but they eventually got the whole process down to about 3.5 hours. So that was a lot easier. But it was fun actually, because they were Chris Bridges is kind of the head of the prosthetics department on Strange New Worlds, and eventually kind of passed it off to Alan Cook, and Shane would work on it. And yeah, we just had a blast. They were really funny guys, and yeah, we just had a good time listening to music and talking about music and nerding out about the movie industry. And yeah, they got me hooked on. God, what was that movie they got me to watch? The Thing.
Oh, wow.
Oh my God. Have you ever seen that movie? It's terrifying.
The John Carpenter thing? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's nightmare fuel.
As prosthetics devotees, they're like, this is the tops. You got to watch this. And it's terrifying. It's really good. So yeah, that was kind of the process, was just kind of, sit in a chair and have people glue stuff on your face. I kind of looked at it like going to a spa. Mm.
That's one way to look at it. I mean, for you, it's a spa. For others, it's just the worst thing in the world. But I am kind of curious, since you are an Aenar, you have the antenna. I mean, were there different sets of antenna for different purposes, or was it always just kind of like one set of antenna glued to your face?
Oh no, it was one set, and I think they for the most part they reused the antenna in the prosthetics pieces, but everything else at the end of the day just kind of got stripped off and thrown away, because it was, I was in there for 12 hours sweating, and so it was kind of slowly breaking down the prosthetic stuff, but the antenna eventually got used more often. But yeah, it was just pretty solid piece on the top of my head.
So when did the character of Hemmer click for you? I mean, was it kind of like an immediate thing that you felt this bond to the character, or did it have to grow to a certain point and then you realized like, oh, I get this now?
I really connected with it from the first reading, actually, that very first scene. There were a few lines in that scene that ended up kind of on the cutting room floor, but Hemmer in that scene kind of, takes a bite out of Uhura a little bit and bucks up against the word. What does she call it? People who are with I can't remember the word she uses in the scene, but anyway, he sort of goes off on a rant about essentially just using your perception in a different way, which I get a lot. People ask me, "Oh, you must have super hearing." It's like, no, I don't have super hearing. It's just that I tend to pay attention to it, and so somebody enters a room, I can tell by not always, but sometimes by the way that they walk, or the way they move down a hallway. As you listen to it, I go, oh, I know exactly how my mom would walk, or my dad's gait coming down the hallway. I can tell the difference between my brothers and things like that with their intonations of their voices outside of a hallway. And so you pay attention to the stuff in a different way. And that's kind of what Hemmer expressed in that scene, is just recognizing the change in temperature, or the direction of the wind or whatever. And I absolutely just connected to that. So I put a little bit of that in my pocket. And as I read the scenes, it seemed like Hemmer would say a lot of things that very easily came out of my own mouth. So it was a pretty easy character to connect with. I think the kind of high status grumpiness is a little bit, that's more of the acting. That's not so much me.
And I was wondering, like, if there was any real life inspiration for who Hemmer was, but it sounds like it was just very much like an extension of who Bruce Horak is.
Well, it's an extension,
minus the grump
to some degree, but I know a few, what should we say, without using names, I know a few hyper intelligent individuals who inspired the character of Hemmer. Mm-hmm.
And Hemmer became a fan favorite too, right away, and that includes myself here. And yeah, I'm curious to know what you thought of this feedback that you got from the fans, this reaction for this character, and why you think Hemmer connected with so many people.
What do I think of it? I think it's amazing. I couldn't be happier to be a character who's on the fan favorite list, because to be one of those characters, like, sorry, or happy to see you go, that would suck. It's pretty great, and really since the start of it was first announced on Star Trek Day, and whatever that was, 2021, 22.
Yeah.
I don't even know what year it is anymore.
Ages ago.
It feels like it, but yeah, from the very first moment, it's just been an incredibly welcoming family. And that's something that's just been kind of ringing all the way from the beginning. This is people welcoming to that world, to the family of it. And it's very, very, it's really nice. What was the second part of the question?
Why did you think that Hemmer connected with so many people?
Why did he connect so well? Well, I guess, I guess his confidence, his self assurance. There's a bit of humor. Um, yeah, and there's just something about the mentor figure. I think people really. I mean, I've always kind of latched on to the mentor figures in movies. Obi-Wan's one of my favorites. So having Uhura's mentor be kind of cool and a little bit aloof, and then slowly warming up over the course of the series seemed like a recipe for success.
I mean, for me, it kind of felt like there was elements of Odo. If you're familiar with Deep Space Nine, there was kind of like that, those elements of the Outsider, but also, since this is Strange New Worlds, this is Star Trek many, many years after the original series first aired, when Spock was that alien character. This time, you're kind of like that foreign element also, where we don't quite know what to expect, who you are, but also the nice, like, warmth of Odo. It is a lot of interesting stuff there in that character. There's so much to, like, dissect, but for me, that's definitely the stuff that made me enjoy him so much on screen.
Yeah, he's pretty great.
You're a little biased, but yeah, no, totally
I'm
is.
a little biased. I am a little biased. Yeah.
I mean, at its core, Strange New Worlds is an ensemble show, though, and you've got a great cast to work with. I'd love to hear a little bit about some of the different folks you got to perform with, starting with the captain, which would be Anson Mount. To me, it seems like that man just exudes Starfleet captain energy 24/7.
100%. 100%. Yeah, my first day wasn't my first day on set. I think my first day on set was actually in shooting in sickbay. But when I had my scene on the bridge, and that was when I first met Anson. He was an incredibly warm person and very welcoming. We shot that first season in pretty serious lockdown conditions, though. So I will say this, that my interaction with the rest of the cast was pretty limited, as we were all, in the hallways sitting 6 feet apart, wearing, our face shields and things like that, and really not encouraged to hang out. And we would have our lunches kind of in our trailers on our own. So I really didn't have much interaction. I'd say the cast members that I had the most interaction with would be Celia and, oddly enough, Ethan, because he would often be in the prosthetic chair getting his ears taken off or put back on again. So those were the two that I really actually connected with the most over the course of this series. Anson, my fondest memory of Anson actually is during the shooting of, what was the episode now? I think it was the one where I'm the wizard. I can't remember the title now.
The Elysian Kingdom.
Elysian Kingdom. Thank you. I just remember coming back from lunch, and there was just this music just blaring coming from the other side of the warehouse where we were shooting. And Anson came in with a Bluetooth speaker over his shoulder, blaring I don't know, Van Halen or something, just pumping everybody's music up, or everybody's spirits up. And he was always one for putting on music and just kind of lightening the mood between takes, because you can feel that. Just over the course of the day, as the exhaustion started to kick in, it's great to have a little shift in that. And he was good for that, for sure. Mm-hmm. But also the other thing was, I would watch. And again, I'm buried behind 15 pieces of prosthetics, so nobody really knew who was under there. But I would observe people between takes and how, they would kind of conserve their energy. And Anson would often sit and read a book and just kind of very, very diligently and professionally, I think, just kind of hold on to what he needed, because you got to come out when it's action time. When somebody says action, you got to go. So there's a real conservation of that long arc of energy. And especially if you're on, it's only Wednesday or whatever, and you've still got 2 more days to go after this. You've got to be really conscious of having the energy, because really, I can't remember what the joke is, something along the lines of, in film and TV, you get paid to wait around.
Yeah.
The acting you do for free.
Very true. It has to be such a unique experience, though, because if you really think about it, you are filming a Star Trek show during a pandemic. That's not going to happen ever again. Hopefully in our lifetimes, never going to happen again.
Yeah.
But what a unique thing to have happen. That must be also just emotionally taxing for you. Just have to be, not able to connect as much with your co-stars because of the fact that there's all these precautions and protocols in the way. Was that something that kind of like weighed on you as the process was happening?
Honestly, it was my first experience in the world. I mean, really, I'd done a commercial, and I had done a day on an indie, or a couple of days on an indie film. So this was really my first experience in the world of film and TV. And so I didn't know any different. So, I was filled up with gratitude to be working, first of all, during a pandemic when pretty much all of my colleagues were under lockdown conditions and theaters were all shut. I was living in, and I do live in Stratford, Ontario, which is a theater town. And, there were 1,000 artists that were in that city that were there to work for the festival. And when it shut down, like everybody was out of work and was going home, and the town kind of emptied up. And here I had this incredible opportunity. So I was just so happy to be working, and under whatever conditions. And they were pretty intense, but honestly, I didn't know any different. So, going back in now and, actually getting to, give somebody a hug on set would be the weird thing for me. It might've been the norm before, but now I was like, what are you doing? But,
Physical contact. No, thank you.
Yeah, I know we've been sort of weaned off it, haven't we?
Yes. We talked about Hemmer being this kind of like mentor character to Uhura, and you mentioned Celia was one of the folks you did get to hang out with a little bit more in between takes. So I'd love to hear a little bit about building your relationship and your rapport with Celia off screen, and how that would help you then on screen if you were able to actually do that kind of thing with her.
Oh, it's so easy. Celia is just she's just open ball of energy. She's just lovely. It was very easy to create that kind of, that's really that smile of her and the glint in her eyes. That's all her. You can tell why she was cast to play that part. Very easy to get along with. And yeah, she's just, I remember, what is that? I think one of the first scenes where we're walking down the hallway together and I'm sort of grilling her on what the unit does, the compression unit or whatever, the air filter unit. So we would go around the corner and then they would call action. And while we were standing around the corner, we'd be singing and making up songs and just kind of having a grand old time. And then I found out she's a Tony Award winning Broadway singer. It's like, oh, I'm just improvising music with like a pro here. That was fun. Yeah, it's very easy. They were all, yeah, I do remember also sitting in the hallway and just everyone coming up and introducing themselves at a distance.
Yeah, of course.
At a very conscious distance. But yeah, it's just, I think I guess I kind of go back to this as like the refrain of my Star Trek experience, but it's got this family atmosphere to it. It really does. And I discovered that with the fans, and I discovered that on the set. And, one of the first questions you would get is, are you a Star Trek fan? And, yeah, it's just, it just leaks into everything. And I think that's, part of the reason why the franchise has been so popular and has lasted as long as it has, is because it really does focus on that building of the family. And we see that, and it seems in every iteration of Star Trek, it's like the bridge crew becomes the family, or the space station crew or whatever, that they really, that leaks out of the screen and kind of welcomes the viewer into the family atmosphere as well.
So we talked about the makeup. We kind of talked about how you formed the character of who Hemmer is, but we didn't talk about the wardrobe yet, because you got to put on the Starfleet duds, the uniform. And I've heard sometimes it can be comfy, sometimes it's not so good. So talk to me about that uniform, Bruce.
It is great. Oh my God. I actually, somewhere in my archives, I have a photo of me standing on my first day. And I love going to the wardrobe trailer so much. Bernadette, she's the wardrobe designer. She's amazing, and that whole department it's one of my favorite rooms or trailers, I guess it is, to visit, because it makes the character complete, and nothing like getting to play dress up. And honestly, the day I got to put on the red shirt, although I did have to say like, oh no, I'm in a red shirt, but I already knew that I was going to bite it, but putting on the red shirt is pretty great. And it's pretty snug. It's pretty, it's pretty form fitting. There's not a lot of room for donuts in that particular outfit, but it's just coolness. You just feel cool in it. You just you're wearing the Starfleet uniform, and I just love the little details, the engineering sort of insignia that's very, very subtly into the pattern on the sleeves, and it's great. It's pretty great. My favorite day was getting to put on the wizard outfit, because I
Yeah,
had
let's talk
started.
about that.
I started a D&D campaign during the pandemic, and my character was a wizard. So getting
Nice.
to put on an actual wizard outfit to go to work is pretty great.
And the Elysian Kingdom is also one of those fan favorite episodes now too, because it was just such like started off as a very fun departure from what Strange New Worlds was. Then, of course, by the end of it, we're all crying completely, nonstop. But let's talk a little bit about Elysian Kingdom though. Getting to wear the wizard outfit, and what was that set like during that time you guys were doing that one? Because that's such a different type of episode.
Yeah, they dressed everything up and with the greenery and the foliage all over, which was really cool. And it was nice to go and it was far enough into this series that we were revisiting the sets and they were changed enough. Oh wow, they've really done it up here. Yeah, it was such a riot. I mean, every episode was great, but that one was a riot because I'm a huge science fantasy nerd as well. So it was the mixture of my favorite genre: science fiction, science fantasy. And plus, I'm playing a wizard in my D&D campaign, so there I am as a wizard, and it's flowing robes. It's all that fun stuff. And Hammer gets a pretty good chunk in that episode. I think it's probably my most screen time of any of the episodes. And working with Babs in that in particular, he's amazing to watch. His process is incredible. Like every single take, he just give a little something different, a little, different take on the scene, so that in editing they would have options to play with. Yeah, he's really something. And as another actor, he's just so giving. He's just so generous with his performance. Yeah, I really enjoyed doing that episode. And yeah, just the fun of all these characters that we'd sort of gotten to know, and suddenly they've changed. There was Rebecca Romaine as the huntress, and yeah, it was cool.
It's such a good
and
episode.
Anson got to be the clown.
Yes, that part was especially wonderful. Yeah, just everybody's roles were just completely reversed. So cool. Have you joined any of the Disco Goes D&D sessions yet?
No.
We got to find a way to get you invited. Anthony Rapp, I hope you're watching this show. I doubt he does, but if you're watching the show, Anthony, get Bruce in part of that.
I want to play.
Yes.
I got a wizard.
Got some whiz biz to do.
That's right.
We talked earlier in the episode also about the way that your eyes interpret the world around you. And I'm curious to know, for you, like the way that you do see things, what did the sets of Star Trek look like to you? Like if you were going to paint them, how would you put that on paper?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, and not only was the character visually impaired, and I'm visually impaired, but I was even further visually impaired in that world because I couldn't wear contact lens. So normally I would either be wearing a contact lens or these very heavy bifocal glasses, which give me, even with these on, I'm only looking at about 10% vision. So during the day of shooting, I wasn't even wearing these. So it was just a total smudge. The whole thing. I would sort of sneak my phone around so I'd take pictures so I can go back and look at them later. But it was a very, in a way, I kind of went method with it because I was almost fully blind for the shooting of the episodes. It's funny, I hadn't even thought of that again until now, but it's true. I spent all of my days from the time I went to the makeup trailer until I left at the end of the day almost fully blind for the shoots. I think about those sets; they are embedded in my tactile sensation because they would give me time before the shooting or between takes often, just to get a literal feel for the rooms. And for the most part, the walls and I think I've got like some background here of what engineering looked like, but I wouldn't see this stuff. I would only really have a tactical sensation of the props and the set pieces that I actually came into contact with. So for me, getting to see them, like when we saw the actual episodes, like, oh, that's where we were. That's what we were looking at. Mm-hmm. So much of those rooms was either added later in CG, or it was far enough away from me that I had no idea what I was looking at. So if it was, 6 or 8 inches away from my face, I could have a sensation or an idea of what it might look like. But anything beyond that was just this kind of smudge and blur. And I have, again, I have to be eternally grateful to the people who worked on that show because they kept me very safe. I wasn't going to walk off an edge or walk into a door or walk into a camera. That only happened once and never again. But they kept me very safe and very secure in where I was and what I was to be looking at, and the direction of the eye line, things like that. But if I was to paint them, a lot of red, a lot of white, and a lot of gold.
It's so interesting to think about it from a tactile sensation instead of a visual sensation. And, I think a lot of people kind of take that for granted too, because set design, you think it's a very visual thing, but it's also very much a tactile thing too, because different textures will reflect light differently, or will just offer different sounds, different things. So, and for you, as you're like walking around sets, do you have this kind of like maybe a tactile vocabulary of like, okay, I know this is how engineering feels. This will dictate a little bit of how I perform here. Was there any of that kind of going on? Like you just knew by feel, maybe like to what to do, what the room was?
It was sound, actually, because all of the rooms sounded different. I mean, the engineering room was all shot on an AR wall. So that was this massive studio room, and it was just buzzing the whole time because it was these screens that show all the background, right? And the screens shift as the camera moves, which was very disorienting. But it was a huge one massive room. And so there's echo in there, or at least an audio sensation of the echo, and hot, very, very hot. Definitely that. But I loved, being in engineering and getting to touch the little panels or whatever, the little jelly beans. I mean, they're just, the tactile sensation. It wasn't until a few days into the shoot where I started to really think about, okay, how is it actually possible for someone who is totally blind to read these displays? How would that, because everything was, in engineering, it's all screen displays and you're kind of looking at the stuff.
All very flat and messy, right?
I could see when they would change because I would see the difference of the lighting or perception or whatever. And then I thought, and I was at home that day making my dinner, and I had the stove on. And as I got close to the element of the stove, and I was putting a pan down on it, before I even got close to it, I could feel the heat radiating from it. I thought, oh yeah, if you've got a screen and there's a pixel in the screen that's on, it's going to radiate a certain amount of heat. Now, if you had hyper awareness of, like the Aenar does, then he would be able to sense where that heat was coming from. So the pixel would be lit up, in which case you'd be able to tell how it was on the screen. If the pixel was on, then you would go, okay, that is now on. So in a way, he would be able to read that. In a way, like I was reading Daredevil comic books at the same time, and they sort of, I can't remember which edition of Daredevil it was, but they were explaining how his radar is basically like a map that part of his brain is filling in. So yeah, anyway, it really struck me about thinking in a tactile and in a kind of non-visual way of the world, and how someone with really heightened senses would actually be able to appear sighted. So I didn't really want to think about playing Hammer as being blind. It's just, no, he's seeing the world in a different way. And so those antennae became, in a way, I would just cock them ever so slightly, as though, okay, that's the information. That's another ear of his visual ear, if you will, that's reading the world.
I think you and I should just start a Daredevil podcast on the side, by the way, because that'd be such a fun thing to do. But yeah, it totally makes sense, though. It's such a unique way to kind of see Star Trek and to be in a Star Trek show. So, Bruce, you mentioned a little bit earlier that you did actually know Hammer wasn't going to make it through the full season. Did you just know that from like day one, or was that something you found out you did from day one? Wow.
Yeah, right from, probably my second or third callback for the role. I met Henry Alonso Myers, and he talked about the character arc, what they were planning to do, what they were hoping to do, which was to build a fan favorite and then kill him off as an emotional springboard for Uhura to make the decision to stay with Starfleet. So knowing that, and it's not like I broadcast it while we were shooting the thing. And when we got to episode 9, I think it was a surprise for a few of the cast members that this was going to be happening.
Oh, so you knew, no one else did.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, because that episode is All Those Who Wander, and it's such an emotional send-off. Wow. Yeah. I mean, that one, again, I hate how much Strange New Worlds tugged on my heartstrings. I really didn't want to cry as much, but thanks to all you guys for doing that to me. But it's such a tough episode to watch just because of that, especially. So, I mean, how did you like the way that Hemmer said goodbye and went off?
Oh, I was thrilled. I was thrilled. Knowing that it was coming, I was a bit worried that it was going to either not land or not be, just not be impactful. And yeah, when I read it, I got to, it was bittersweet. It was, it was bittersweet. I was sorry that he went, but I was very happy that he went the way that he did. And, from the start of shooting that on Star Trek, I was scratching things off my bucket list. And, I got to do a scene on the bridge. I got to play with the transporter. I got to hold a communicator, and I got to give the Vulcan salute and actually say that to Spock, live long and prosper. And also to give a little bit of advice at the end, and then to sacrifice myself. I mean, that was cool. Oh, I will say one thing that did end up, sorry, just to backtrack, something that did end up on the cutting room floor was originally they had shot it so that Hammer would fall backwards off the back of the ship, and there was going to be a shot of him falling back. Yeah. So I got to spend a couple of days doing wire work. So they hooked me up in a harness and flew me up into the ceiling and had the camera on the floor so I would fly away from it, and they would reverse the shot so it looked like I was falling. Ah. So I got to do a day in a harness and flying up, and unfortunately that didn't end up, but I did get to do it, and that meant I got a thank you t-shirt from the stunt department. So I did stunts. I can put that on my resume. And flew like a story and a half or 2 stories up in the air on this harness rig, which was really cool. The first time I did it, I think I probably needed to change of pants, but over the course of the day, we went up and down a few times, and I got used to it. And I can say I would probably do it again. It was so fun. But yeah, that scene, just to get back to Hemmer's grand and noble sacrifice. I was really happy with it. I was really happy with the way it turned out, and that it had any impact. Awesome.
And Star Trek and Shakespeare share so many commonalities in the material in general. And I feel like the way that Hemmer goes also, it felt very Shakespearean. This felt like the perfect thing for Bruce Horak to kind of show his skills with. How did you feel about those actual final moments? Did it just kind of feel like a Shakespearean play for you?
It was it did. It felt really honest. It felt really sincere, and it had the heightened emotional side of it, which was great. Didn't have to work too hard because it was all in the words on the page, and that certainly is my experience with Shakespeare, is that the words tell the story, and if you just say the words that are written, and if they're well written, which they are on Star Trek. I think that first season of Strange New Worlds is like really well crafted. You just simply have to say the words and, be truthful and honest in the way you go.
Did the cast and crew do anything special for that last day on set for you?
Did get a few farewell gifts. Yeah. There's a tradition in film and TV where after you've done your final shot, people just gather around, and there's a pretty warm send-off, applause and hugs and things. And it was Sally and I's last days together on the same day. So that was a real emotional send-off. And then the prosthetic guys actually gave me a set of those antennae, which I very proudly have at home. And I put them on my Chewbacca doll. Just to cross the streams a bit.
That's pretty cool. They let you take that makeup home. And that actually kind of leads into my next question here. As they say in Deep Space Nine, they ask the question of what you left behind, but I'm curious, what you took with you from your time on Strange New Worlds, and what did Bruce leave behind on that set?
Oh, a lot of sweat, mostly off of my face. What did I take with me? Oh my God, so many memories, so many great memories, images of being on those sets and doing those scenes. And also just sitting and imagining what it was going to look like when it was all finished. And then seeing it and just being blown away by how grand it was. Honestly, one of the most thrilling things was when I got they sent out like a cast trailer of the episodes before it had aired, and I got to see the opening credits of the first episode, and my name shows up in the credits. I had no idea. I honestly thought, there were people that were on that show that shot more scenes than me, more footage. Chief Kyle, I think, is in as many scenes as I am. So why, that I'm in the opening credits, it really choked me up quite a bit. In terms of what I took from the set, it was a pair of antenna, nothing else. There were a few kind of like the various departments had wrap gifts made. So the prosthetics department, for instance, had a T-shirt made, which I got one of those. It's got a prosthetics crew on the side, which is pretty great. And the stunt department gave me one. And and then wardrobe and costumes. Yeah, they had a water bottle made. So look what you went and did, which is really cool. And of course, the production team gave us all like wrap jackets, which that's a prized possession for sure. My Star Trek Strange New Worlds bomber jacket, which I think I may have laminated or something.
I think the big question that fans want to know is, would Bruce Horak like to ever come back to the Star Trek universe?
Yeah.
Or even finish it. You're like, yeah, let's do this.
Yeah. Would Bruce Horak ever? Yes, he probably would.
Would you want to play another alien, or would you want to be a human?
Oh, honestly, I just love the mask work. I love playing aliens. It's one of my favorite things is getting into makeup like that. So yeah, give me an alien, please. Sure, for comfort and ease, I'll play the human. If I want an easy job, yeah, sure, I'll play a human. I think I just distanced and mount. Whoops. No, I'm kidding. I will. I'd just love to come back and play in that universe, because it really is. It's like a dream come true. It's like getting to be a kid again and run around with a phaser. It's awesome.
All right. So, Bruce, on your many episodes of Strange New Worlds, I'd like to ask, what was your most favorite day on set, and what was the most challenging day on set for you?
Oh, favorite day on set. Great question. There's just so many. I really loved the day where this was on Elysian Kingdom, where sort of the big confrontation in the hallway, and I flip out the communicator and send the people off to the hangar deck or whatever it was. That was really fun, because got to kind of mess around a little bit. And, the magic of science prevails. That was really fun. I kind of threw a little Elvis into there, which is one of the secrets to my acting, is to find a spot to do a little Elvis Presley. So that was fun, and that was a super fun day on set. But honestly, they were all really great. And what was the other question?
What was the most challenging day on set for you?
The challenging day. Well, certainly I found shooting the death scene to be challenging. It was dragging up a lot of emotional content, but also knowing that this was the big demise that I'd been told about. It's and certainly because the way things were all broken up over the course of shooting, we ended up having to go back and do some reshoots and some shots on the Aenar wall. So my last day of shooting was pretty challenging. It just felt like last day of school, but not in a good way. Usually with last day of school, it's like, hey, we're going into summer, but it was like, wow, like this is it. This is what I'd spent all that time working on. And the final scene that we shot was actually landing on the planet in episode 9, and kind of walking across and saying, oh, it's just like Andoria. And just that final wrap. It was really sweet having the send off, but it was also that kind of emotional, oh, okay, there we are, away we go. And who knows what happens next.
I am happy, by the way, you mentioned that scene with power of science prevailing. I love that scene so much. Just let me banish you all to the shadow realm now.
That's right.
So I got some non-Trek stuff for you too, Bruce. I'd love to know, what's the best piece of advice or life lesson that anybody ever gave to you that you still think about and use today?
Oh, there's so many. I've been really blessed with a lot of really wonderful mentors in my life. And Yeah, they've given me a lot of great advice. James Gordonier, who was a painter, a Canadian painter.
Hmm.
I met him when he was about 80 years old, and we got talking about painting and just living the creative life. And he said that one thing he would often tell his students was that if they ever got stuck painting, that they should just keep painting. And it's a phrase that I think about all the time as I'm kind of dealing with either a painting project or a writing project or acting or whatever, and you kind of get stuck. And it's like the impulse often is to kind of put it down and walk away and maybe give up on something. But that phrase of you get stuck painting, keep painting kind of comes back in. And so I apply that to a lot of things in my life, because oftentimes it's in the struggle that the greatest learning happens.
Yeah, a big theme of my questions for this episode has been about the way that you see the world and the way that you interpret the world around you. And, speaking as an actor who is visually impaired, is there something that you wish visually able folks knew and understood about visually impaired people that you wanted to get out there?
I guess I often surprise myself in what I'm able to do. And for instance, like figuring out a way to juggle was something that I thought, wow, there's just absolutely no way to do this. I don't have depth perception. And I kind of practiced and practiced and practiced. And one of my brothers made the really astute observation that juggling isn't about learning to catch. It's about learning to throw. And if you throw it the same way every time, then it's always going to land in the same spot and the catch will take care of itself. Mm. And that was a big turning point in how I figured out how to learn to juggle. And so I was surprised by my ability to juggle as fully sighted people are when they see me juggle three things. And in that sort of shared excitement and shared like disbelief, I think there's an opportunity for connection. So allowing for the opportunity to try something, to fail at it, maybe to get better at it and to succeed at it, is an opportunity for people of all abilities to connect. I will be as surprised by my success as somebody else, but also to celebrate in that success together, I think is an opportunity to share in all of our abilities.
So, Bruce, most important thing today, what's the best thing about being a part of the Star Trek universe?
What's the best thing? I think it's the legacy. I think that it's going to be around, and that it's going to be around for a long time, and that Hemmer was so loved. And I went to my very first Star Trek convention in Las Vegas last summer, and Jonathan Frakes, who, I just I completely fanboyed as I met him, but he observed it. He said, look, like this community is all about love, and who wouldn't want that? And it went to that convention, and just a lineup of people coming up to express how deeply fond they were of Hemmer, how much they loved Hemmer, and how sorry they were to see him go. And it was like getting to attend my own funeral. It was really lovely. That it's had such a wonderful impact on people, and that there was so much love for it. That's just the best.
I'm still angry that Hemmer is gone, but I'm happy that you've enjoyed the experience, and I definitely look forward to seeing more Bruce in Star Trek shows for the future. But you brought up the cons. How did you like your first ever Star Trek con in Vegas? That's got to be a weird thing.
It was so great. It was wonderful. I was just on cloud nine for the entire weekend. Everyone I met was just so lovely, and got to sit on a panel. It was a real whirlwind for sure. I wish that I could have just frozen a few of those moments, just to hold on to them forever. But I can't wait to do more. I really can't.
Well, I do know you've got a few coming up, so let's talk about what else Bruce Horak has coming up very soon, because you got a show that you're in. You're also doing some more con appearances. So tell us what's going on in the world of Bruce Horak.
Well, I'm currently in Calgary, Alberta, my old hometown. I'm rehearsing Richard III for the Shakespeare Company, which opens April 14th. So I'm working on that 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, rehearsing a little Richard III Shakespeare. And that takes me to the beginning of May. And then I can't remember the exact dates. You'll have to remind me, Matthew. TrekCon or Long Island.
Yeah, that's right. You're going to be at Trek Long Island, May 20th and 21st in Hop Hog, Long Island, which is not that far from the city. Yeah, I cannot wait to finally meet you in person because I'm going to be there. I'm going to be doing a panel there as well.
Oh, great.
So I'll be doing a whole bunch of things. I'm super excited though to get to meet you in person. So I cannot wait to have that face-to-face time with you.
Yeah. So I'll be there at Trek Long Island, and then end of July I'll be at Volcon in Vulcan, Alberta.
Nice.
Which is not far from Calgary, and they're having I guess this is like their 30th anniversary of the Star Trek convention in Vulcan, which will be it'll be lovely because got the hometown advantage. And then when is it? August, I'm performing in Vancouver at Bard on the Beach, doing a production of Goblin Macbeth, which is a show that my creative partner Rebecca Northen and I have created, where 3 goblins discover the complete works of William Shakespeare and decide to do their version of Macbeth. And we are in these goblin masks that were made by Composite Effects, which is these are movie grade, movie quality goblin masks. And so it's combining a couple of my favorite worlds, again, fantasy and Shakespeare. So it's a gory, bloody mess of 3 goblins doing Macbeth. And that happens in August, September. And then it's out at the Stratford Festival in September, October with goblins. Yeah.
Do you throw in a little Elvis as well as your goblins and your Shakespeare all in the same show?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There's always room for Elvis. There's always room.
All right. Well, I don't even know how to top that sentence, but Bruce, thank you so much for chatting today and telling us all about your life, your experiences in Star Trek. And yeah, it's been so awesome chatting with you because really you do have such a unique part in the world of Star Trek. What you did is so different, and how you did it, especially, is truly amazing. So I loved hearing about your experiences and how you interpret the world. Honestly, I would love to see you do a self-portrait as Hemmer, because I'd love to see what you see in him and what you see in that character.
All right, I'll get on it.
You got some homework to do, Bruce. So thank you so much. Appreciate all of your time.
Thanks, Matthew. Appreciate it. Thank you.
That's it for this week's episode of Trek Untold. Until next time, don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Trek Untold, all one word. If you'd like to directly support this podcast, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter over on patreon.com/Trek Untold, which gives you access to some great perks that can't be beat. Or pick up some merchandise from our store, or use my Amazon shop link to check out all kinds of different Star Trek merchandise. Links for all these things are in the show notes. Shout out to Triple Fiction Productions for being a key sponsor of Trek Untold. Don't forget to check them out and all of the fine folks whose ads you've seen or heard on this podcast too. If you have any questions, feedback, or comments for the show, or would like to suggest a guest or discuss sponsorship options for any of these episodes in the future, send me a message at trekuntold@gmail.com. I hope to see you here again as we uncover more untold stories from Star Trek and beyond, and get to know even more amazing people who have contributed to this ever-expanding universe. Until next time, I'm Matthew Kaplowitz, and remember, fortune favors the bold.
Trek Untold is sponsored by TrekSphere.com, promoting fan-produced Star Trek content in all forms, is powered by the RageWorks podcasting network, and is affiliated with Nerd News Today.